Good evening everyone and welcome to Fireside Chat. For anyone who's very new to this, my name is Brent and we are sitting in our camp here at Djuma Private Game Reserve. Mark is on his way back from drive. He's going to come join me in the seat over here. And for what we're going to do for the first half an hour is we're going to Mark and I are just going to chat and we're going to have an update on the week that's been. And then for the last half an hour, it's you as the viewer's chance to ask us questions, questions that might not be relevant on drive, a little bit more about ourselves, where we're from, what we've maybe done before, and you can do that via using the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or you can do that by email, which is questions@WildEarthTV. But please remember, for the first half an hour, Mark and I are just going to do a recap, and for the second half an hour, that is when we will take your questions, and those are the questions that sometimes might not be relevant while we're out watching lions and leopards and doing what we love. So it's really great to be here. This is my first fireside chat in a while. I was on leave and then I had to go to a friend's wedding, so it's been a while for me. So it'll be nice to hear from you. And I can see Marcus.
Hello, Brent.
How's it, Marcus?
How you doing?
I'm going to try to stand up without losing my earpiece.
Jambo bwana.
Jambo bwana, how about again?
Nzuri sana. Nzuri. Kukiti hapa moto. Hello, everybody, and yes, just a bit of Swahili banter. Good to be here. We're sorry we're late. You're talking about half hours and half hours, so.
Oh no, I just said we're going to try and make it work as best we can.
As best we can.
Yeah. So as we said, for the first portion, we're gonna. Day.
You must. I'm trying to think.
Stand by. We're not live. Sorry guys, we're not sure what happened there, but the weather has been with our communications and our signal at the moment. As everything's got really dry and the rain's come in, so the moisture has crept in, and I don't think...
maybe solar flares and electromagnetic fields. And,
exactly.
Yes, and new moon.
New moon, definitely.
So I think there's a combination of factors, and just gremlins, usual wild earth gremlins that we are subject to. I mean, we're doing a live broadcast from the middle of Africa. Well, we're not in the middle, we're down south. We're in the middle of South Africa.
And that's one of the things that happens out here in the bush.
But we were talking about our previous week here.
Yeah, and as I said, I missed all the lines and that because I just got back from a wedding.
And depending on my memory
I know.
to recall what we've seen in the last week. Well, there was the Salala breakaways. Yes, there were they're back at Fireside Dam at the moment.
And I'm planning to go look for them tomorrow morning.
Yes, I hope so. But you've got a few things on your plate tomorrow morning.
I do?
Well, I would think so. I think there's maybe just go past sea quarantine and then
just
you'll have
check
to go, and then you go via the hyena den. This was interesting. The hyena den this evening, and you followed more of the drag marks. I found drag marks this morning, and they were coming from sort of across the Mulwati, across Twin Dams Road, onto that really new shortcut that is called, what are you calling it?
Ingwe Alley.
Ingwe
Scott
Alley.
named it, actually.
Scott named it. Well, Scott, I think, drove. Scott and Wiem, I think it was Viem's favourite road.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a road, and since we've been here, they actually mowed it this year. They made it a new road.
Well, I don't know if it was official, but
it's
there. They'll have to wait for another season for it to grow over. But the drag marks were heading down there, and I surmised that it was heading towards the hyena den, found the hyena tracks. But we didn't get to see where the tracks came from. And I'm actually glad I didn't try, because it was a long way.
Very, very long track. So I went out after drive today, just to go tracking. We heard reports that Mvula had been seen heading towards Buffelshoek Dam.
That's right.
So I went out after drive and I went tracking, and I found Mvula's tracks on top of the drag mark. And for a second, I was a bit confused. I was wondering whether he had dragged and whatnot. And after we sort of figured out the newsprint, so to speak, so reading the bush news, that the drag mark was a bit older than Mvula, and he just happened to walk on the same path that the
But he must have
hyenas.
Smelled, he must have also
I'm
smelled,
sure.
and maybe chose not to follow.
But we went all the way to our northern boundary, and those drag marks were coming from north of us. So I mean, that's a good 4.5, 5 kilometers that hyena dragged, an adult impala, and judging from the drag when I was following it up there, it was an adult impala.
Yes.
Big drag.
Well, judging by the spinal column and ribs we saw, it's a fairly large animal.
Yeah.
And that's all that's left right now. It's just the spinal column and ribs.
That hyena must have been very fat.
Oh gosh, his belly's dragging on the ground. I mean, we had somebody asked, I think she's pregnant or is she full? She coveted that carcass all day, because when I went to see her at the start of drive, she was lying under a bush and she wouldn't let anyone else come near her, and she had already fed on it, and she dug herself. In fact, she got up and she was digging in the wet sand to make this little hollow, because her belly wasn't. Belly wasn't quite fitting properly, and any of the other hyenas even looked at her. She glared at them, and with enough daggers in her eyes to make them not even think about approaching.
That's also quite interesting. That must mean she must be quite a dominant female in the clan.
Yes.
Because I don't think a very low-ranking female would ever bring her carcass back. She would try to hide it in the bush or in a pan. Mm-hmm. So the fact that she's bold enough to take that carcass back to the den would mean she's a very high-ranking female.
And now, here comes the interesting part.
Aha.
Because, although she gorged herself, and no doubt it's more important for her to feed on most of it, because she's still suckling, so she still wants to produce milk, but also it's just the nature of the way things go. Better for her to survive, or to take sustenance first, and then rather than give up sustenance,
especially
to
if she is one of the higher-ranking animals in the clan.
So it was interesting when we got there. Excuse me. Was this iced water? Cool. Excuse me. Nice.
Very nice.
I used to say hot, ice water, hot day, cold water, hot day. But when we got back there, she had left the bush. She was out from the bush, and I could see on the other side of the termite mound, I could see the remains of the carcass, and she had actually dragged it to the entrance of the den.
Wow.
And she was letting the cubs do their thing. But she was also, at the same time that we got there, as we got there, she was having a little bit of a dominance chat to the other female. Excuse me, off on the side. And that seemed to suffice, because the other female stayed put for a while, and she stood over the carcass while the older cub fed on it.
Very interesting. But I mean, it's so interesting, the hyena dynamics at a den.
Yeah.
And literally, we a lot of the times I think we're guessing, and I've spoken to hyena researchers before who've misidentified male, female, and they study those animals on a daily basis.
Sometimes the only time they know whether it's a female is when it gives birth.
And starts suckling.
But now here's another interesting part. Sorry, I know I'm going to, because this is, we saw behavior we've never filmed before, not to my knowledge. We've visited hyena dens so many times. But when she was having this little chat to the other female, the cubs were pulling the carcass, and the two younger ones dragged it to the mouth of the den, and they were almost dragging it into the den, and the single older cub was trying to pull it back out. And the younger ones were actually domineering the bigger one.
Possibly female cubs, and the older one might be a male cub, even though it's
from a
dominant female.
It's a good example. It's a good possibility.
It'd be very interesting to watch.
But it was also then interesting how she stood over it to make sure that her cub fed, and she actually physically kept the other two little ones away.
And even at that age, it's actually unusual, in my experience, to see. I mean, they play with meat; they don't really eat meat. In my experience, that I've seen.
Yeah, no, I think this was more a lesson, and it was a lot more of pulling the carcass around, learning to grab it because one would pull and then stop, the other one would pull and stop. I think it's got to get to this point where one is pulling and the other one is pulling, and that is to tear it off, to tear things off. But there was one interesting thing where the older cub was feeding, and it actually put its paw on against the rib cage to pull. And that's not something. That's something that's learned. That's something that you develop after feeding for a little bit. The instinct, or it's not instinct, surely not, because I've seen some individuals don't even think of it.
But it's going to be very interesting to watch that hyena den as it develops. But moving on to Mr. Quarantine, right outside our final control.
Right outside final control. And in this virtual same time period as his brother killing his steenbok.
I think that's where the confusion came that morning. Because we were obviously with the rain, you saw all of us. For those of you who haven't been, when it rains, unfortunately, with all the sensitive video equipment and whatnot, we're not able to go out. So while we were sitting under the shed doing a show and tell and a storytelling session, what we heard was Djuma male leopard had killed an impala right next, about 60 meters from our final control. So actually, Stefan and myself went out while you and Scott held down the fort.
Yes.
We went out to go have a look in the rain if we could find it.
Well, that's why you got so...
I wasn't just playing in the rain for fun.
I would have.
But it turned out it wasn't, and we had heard from the guides before that it was Djuma, but it turned out it actually wasn't. It was Quarantine.
Djuma's also somehow managed to slip away.
Strangely enough, when I went out tracking the other day, I didn't look. I admit I didn't look at my photos so well, and I popped the photos of this leopard who. I think it's because it didn't snarl at me. I was like, wow, this is... And it definitely wasn't Quarantine. We knew where Quarantine was.
The one you thought that was Bahuti?
I thought it was Bahuti. So I handed it over to the Sabi Sands leopard group, and they sorted me straight quickly. It was Djuma. But the funny thing is, it's just the way he behaved.
He was accepting.
Accepting. We drove up to about 5 meters from him. He did nothing.
I've had moments with him where he hasn't. But I was... Funny you should mention that, because I was about to mention, without you guys, the viewers out there that get to know these cats so well, without you we would obviously be quite lost, because you help us so much when it comes to identification. In fact, I had a similar experience this week with Karula. I had chanced upon her out of the blue. It was a wonderful thing up on Vuyatela Access Road, almost where that elephant was yesterday. Except she was coming the other way, and she walked in the opposite direction. Now between that point in Vuya's Access Road, you go follow those elephant paths. There's some old mud pans.
It's a wonderful
beautiful area there. She used to spend a lot of time, especially when the pans were full, with Mishu and Induna. We used to find them there a lot, especially because Mishu, because he had a bit of an obsession with terrapins. So he was a funny character. But following her, there was a moment when I first saw this cat on the road and how nonchalant she was and how she kind of ignored us, and everything was Karula. But then there was a point when she was sitting under a tree, and I suddenly had a doubt, because she was heading more or less in the direction of Simbambili.
So shadow sort of domain.
Yeah. And I thought, well, maybe, just maybe. And at one point, the shadows, but the shade and the shadows of where she was sitting, and she was frowning a little bit. As many times as I've seen her, and as much as I love that cat, and as much as I profess to know her quite well, I had a doubt. And it was only the viewers that managed to sort it out.
And I made the mistake on my favorite leopard.
Yes.
Which is a bit embarrassing. Sorry guys. I'm going to hide behind my hands for a second.
Okay, we're done.
Okay, we're done now.
We make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of learning, is that
But the nice thing which was happened on Quarantine is that we've been able to follow the carcass, and I will definitely go check the carcass tomorrow. But what was very exciting for me in the last few days is I got to see 2 leopards I've never seen before.
Okay, Shadow
and a current cub.
I didn't know you haven't seen them yet.
No, I haven't seen them.
I've seen the cub more than I've seen Shadow, or maybe it's kind of equal. But I've seen the cub a couple of times without her.
Okay.
Which has been just circumstance. Once was when the cub was treed by hyenas, and we'd seen her at the kill, and that was almost second windmill on the other side of Arathusa, but it was just on the other side of that dip. So just prior to getting there, we didn't have signal, and we're sort of hoping and praying that when we get there,
There's going to be
Gonna be
signal.
signal, and we just managed to maneuver the vehicle that we got signal. The cub was up this really spindly tree, and she was there at first, but I think it was maybe the second day or that afternoon when she wasn't. And then we just happened to find on Arethusa's access road one day, sitting over a branch. It was quite pretty. She's a very pretty little he. Isn't it a he?
I couldn't see. He was lying
Well,
in the,
there-
or
now
he or she was lying in a
Question session comes up
exactly.
after
You
this.
guys need to remind us: is
Yes.
Shadow's cover he or she?
I think it might be.
And just on that note, guys, if you do want to send us questions, you can send them via email to questions@wildearth.tv, or use the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter. But apart from that, it's actually been a relatively quiet week, elephant-wise.
It has.
I've seen one breeding herd, and it was a very small breeding herd, and they moved off, and then I think I saw a very brief visual of one breeding herd on Arethusa. Maybe it's to do with the rain.
Could be it's a seasonal thing too. I mean, I think it's renowned that March, April, that part of April, there's this mass movement of elephant from the Sabi Strand going up to perhaps the Mopani Veld a little bit further north, and perhaps there's going to be a little bit of break from Ellie. The one wonderful thing about the elephant that we did see yesterday, and you got a glimpse of it, and I don't know if any of you managed to get a glimpse of it.
Oh, thanks. We've got our first question in. Thank you very much, Christine. Christine would like to know, what are our hobbies outside of taking photographs and wildlife? I'm going to let you take this first.
Photographs and wildlife. I live in the bush. I don't go to, that's what I do. If I'm not driving Wendy or the Jigger here and I'm at home, I'm driving my Land Rover doing the same thing with my own camera pretty much, or walking around. So pretty much whatever I do here is what I do at home.
So I'm actually very similar to Mark. Fortunately, my family also has a place in a reserve not too far from here. So I spend a lot of time tracking and walking. But I do have one or two other hobbies outside of photography and wildlife. And the main one is probably fishing. I really enjoy fishing. Travels with me.
I don't really do much fishing. I like to watch them. I prefer putting a mask and snorkel, or in places where the water is accessible. And where it's not accessible, I'd rather build a little tank and put them in and watch them and then put them back in the river. Or just at least get to know what the species are that live there. But I did do a little bit of fishing in the past. I'm not keen on it.
Each to their own.
Indeed.
Jennifer from Toronto, thank you very much for your next question. Jennifer would like to know if myself, if I've done, and I assume it's for both of us, if either of us have ever done a canoeing safari before.
I have, but not an overnight one. I've been down in Lower Zambezi. I think you've probably done the same.
Jennifer, I've done quite a few, but as I get older, I get wiser, and I choose not to do canoeing safaris anymore.
No, I love it.
But no, I've canoed the Milkui in Zambia.
Well, then I understand your reticence.
And then we attempted to start the first canoeing safaris on a river called the Luego River in southern Tanzania. And after about a day and a half of doing that and being charged by about 17 million different hippos, we decided it was far better to drag the canoes along the bank. So it's a very shallow river, and the hippos are very prevalent, and then the huge pods during the dry season.
I experienced hippos on both the Okavango Delta and in the Lower Zambezi. Well, in the Okavango Delta, it's not really canoes, they're dugouts, and in those days there were still real dugouts. And fortunately now they've actually changed it, and they've got to the fiberglass replicas of the dugouts, what we call the makoros. But it is not, for me, sitting almost, because in a canoe, or rather a kayak, a canoe, you're sitting almost water level, you're sitting really low down. It's a unique perspective, especially when you're elephants on the bank. And
you're sitting on all legs, I've got nowhere to go. But Anne from San Francisco would like to know whether hyenas get TB in the same way lions do, which is actually a very interesting question. Very nice question.
I was having a look at my books today because I got a question this morning about leopards and whether they are also susceptible to carcasses.
Yeah.
And I was looking at two of the books that I have. One is Tim Caulfield's, no, that's the Wilderness Guardian. I haven't got them. I've got Game Ranch Management, which is the J.D.P. Bottomer book, and there's another one called the Capture and Care Manual, and it's all about capturing and caring of wild African animals. But I haven't been through all of the references that refer to diseases, and I'm going to have to probably research a bit further, maybe have to go online.
So just on my experience on that, I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with different scientists, and hyenas have such an amazing immune system that I'm not 100% sure about TB and their capacity for different bacteria and that is far higher than the felids, than the cat family. I'm not 100% about TB, but I've never heard of a hyena that's got TB.
No, I haven't. But I suppose it also has a lot to do with the digestive system that is so much more tolerant, and it probably kills a lot more pathogens than lion and leopard are likely to do. It's hard to tell. We need to sort of do some more consulting in that.
Hi, Sharon from Memphis. Thank you very much for your question. Sharon in Memphis would like to know, do hyenas have baby teeth? Do they lose their teeth? And what age do they start eating solid food?
All mammals, most mammals, have their baby teeth and their adult teeth. I mean, all of the predators, you should know, having dogs and cats at home, if you've ever raised dogs and cats, kittens and pups, there comes a time when they start, and it's never sort of all of them, it's very much like us, one tooth pulls out at a time and gets replaced, so that the animal doesn't necessarily, well, it can still eat and doesn't really starve to death. At what age are they weaned, I think was the other part of this.
Correct.
I think we're seeing them on this carcass for the first time we're seeing something that big brought to the den. I was saying that
they're under 6 months still.
Yeah, but I think that if they'd done that before, we visited so often, we would have seen if they'd had something. We would see them chewing on bones. So it's probably one of the first times at this age that they're starting to experience bone and stuff. I'm pretty sure that up until now they've tasted. I don't know of records of hyena regurgitating.
Well,
like wild dog do.
Yeah, exactly. In my experience, I've seen, and I've been very lucky in the amount of time I've spent in hyena dens. And this hyena den I'm talking about, it's not very far from here. And we saw very much a subordinate female in the clan.
Yeah.
She came across, I presume, I'm guessing here, a baby duiker that was sleeping and hiding while the mother was feeding or close by. And she grabbed the baby duiker and brought it back to the den. She was the only female who had cubs at that time, and she had one young cub who was still dark. He was 3 months old, and she literally was with her nose pushing the carcass at him.
Yeah.
And he'd sat there and he'd pull on the ear and just play with it.
He didn't know what to do with it.
He didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I mean, in other dens I've seen hyenas generally, I'd say 8 months, 7 months, 8 months, but they do not lactate, nurse for much longer than other predators. They do nurse for over a year.
Yeah. We've seen things doing, but there's also, I think what you're describing is also this process of associating prey, and it's a process that requires the youngsters to see it as a whole thing before they see it somewhat dismembered and as an articulated skeleton, so that at first the animal is still whole, but it might be dead or barely dead, and the youngsters have to sniff it, they have to get a feel for what it really is. They have to
So just carrying on with the hyenas, we've got quite an interesting question from Blair. Blair would like to know, do male hyenas do any of the raising of the cubs?
no, in my opinion, male hyenas. Not. I mean,
You don't want to be a male hyena. Out of all the males in the bush, the last thing you want to be is a male hyena. You are at the bottom of every food chain in
and if you
hyena
look at the
society.
contrast of wild dog, then even a subordinate male will be left as a babysitter, perhaps, or will have some function. But males don't really participate in the clan in hyenas. Males are always outsiders. They're always on the fringes. They're never really brought into what is known as the sisterhood, this very, very tight-knit group of associated females that run the clan.
Guys, thanks very much for your questions on hyenas. We've got a question from Gilly in Milwaukee, who would like to know about the slow motion dance of the Nyala. And it's a very interesting question, and we actually do get to see it quite often, but it is very unusual for most species to do something like this. So instead of physically fighting, although Nyala males will physically fight, they will, instead of fighting, they basically have a walk-off, a fashion monkey-off, who's prettier than the most one. So who can sort of walk the straightest, who's got the prettiest man, and they stand and they do that stiff leg walk next to each other. And in a lot of ways, especially when a younger male, and this is just my opinion, it's not scientific fact, is challenging. They manage to get to a stage where they know, no, he's better than me. I'm just going to pretend to walk away. And one of the interesting things is when you actually see that, the male who wins those stands-off will raise his tail. And the male who loses drops his tail and walks away. So it's actually a very, very interesting, probably evolutionary development to stop them actually having to physically fight. So,
and it's also the very thing that has driven the sexual dimorphism.
Completely.
It's the very thing
I think you got a really good question about sexual dimorphism this morning.
I did, the very same subject.
Yeah.
So to reiterate, it's what's created that beautiful white dorsal crest, the darker markings, and it is probably also driven by sexual preferences of the females, and that the darker, the better maned male, the one that looks better, that has won the fight, is also the one that the females want to mate with. So it's a sort of a dual-driven dimorphism that's occurred there.
So we got a question from Lewis, New York. Lewis is asking about that zebra I saw a couple of mornings ago that had a very deep gash down its left-hand flank. Lewis, firstly, it was a female zebra. It wasn't a male. And have we seen it since? Is there any updates? I haven't. Mark, did you?
Haven't seen. I tracked zebra up Rebecca's Road this morning. But
it was on Cheetah Cutline.
Okay.
But
no, I haven't seen it.
So just on the update on that. Sorry, 1 second, guys. Sorry. On that update about the zebras, as I said, even though that wound was quite deep and whatnot, it didn't catch any tendons. It didn't catch any arteries. Yeah. So even though it was a very deep and it looked really, really bad, the zebra was walking normally. And in those circumstances, in my experience, animals have an unbelievable resilience to bounce back, unless meets another lion very shortly.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, just judging from the way that zebra was moving and the way it looked, it was relatively healthy.
I think if you look closely at almost every adult zebra, you're going to find where the stripes don't quite match.
That's my favorite. So when a lion scratches the back of a zebra, it just doesn't
quite
make sense.
Meet up again because it heals in a way that you can see the stripes aren't matching. And I think from that point of view, you see how many zebras do heal, no matter how deep the gashes are. I have to be honest, I've seen lion with also pretty deep gashes from buffalo horns and things, and they also heal. So resilience is a very important factor.
Well, we've got a question from Ria in Holland. Thanks very much for your question, Ria. Ria would like to know, I spoke about lions roaring quite a bit yesterday because I heard them to the south and to the east of us, and she would like to know if we think that we're mating.
Could be. I didn't hear it.
I didn't. So I heard females to the south and I heard males to the east. So I think they were completely separate. But there's always a possibility. I'm pretty sure Somewhere in the Sabi Sands there's definitely a mating lion, but I can't say for sure about those.
Where out there? The last I heard was when they were crossing over on Gowrie Main from Twin Dams and they were heading south. That was the Matimba male and the Styx female, and they hadn't quite yet gotten to where he was covering her. She wasn't quite accepting him yet. But I haven't really heard lions since then, so I'm afraid I can't tell. I have been past Twin Dams on several occasions, hoping that they would maybe come back north, but they haven't yet, and I'll have to, maybe we'll find out tomorrow with the drive.
We've got quite a nice, sweet question from Karen in Oregon. Karen wants to know, why do our African sunsets look so much better than everywhere else, and why is there so much colour? Well, Karen, obviously it's because it's Africa, and everything's better in Africa. But no, I'll let Mark tell you the actual reasons why.
Well, the colour is actually because the sun is coming through the atmosphere at a very, very low angle, and with the moisture that we have in the air, only the pink and reds, or the red spectrum of light comes through, and so we're seeing all the shades of red, the oranges, from fiery oranges to deep reds. And it will get even redder as the dry season wears on and you get a lot of dust in the air.
Fires.
And the fires that create smoke. We've also got a lot of cloud in the sky at the moment, and of course that as well creates a little bit of a barrier to the light rays. Now if you have to imagine the brightness of the day when it's midday, the sun is coming at a 90-degree angle through our atmosphere, but from where we look at it, when the sun is setting, it is slanting through. Although it's a very thin layer of atmosphere, it's coming through at an angle, so it's a much deeper, denser part that somehow filters out pretty much all spectrums of light except for the reds, and that's what gives us color. It was also probably because we're so far south. Could be, well, there's a lot of truth in what Brent says, because it's Africa, because of the. It's because it's Africa. The clouds give it a lot of color, though.
Good evening, Valerie. Valerie would like to know more about the owls we hear at night. And we do hear quite a few different species at night. And I'm sure we've all got our own favorites. So I'll do a couple, and I'll let Mark do a couple. So for me, personally, my all-time favorite owl in southern Africa is always the giant eagle owl, or Verreaux's eagle owl, which we don't actually hear. I just love the call. That low-pitched.
There's a pair that sometimes you hear around Twin Dams if you're there in the evening.
And then the other one I love a lot. So I like the biggest one and the smallest one is the Scops.
Okay.
Little Scops owlet, and he sits there, goes. Burp, burp. And a friend of mine, when they were, still teenagers, in Botswana, we were sitting in a camp in the bush, and he was like, no, he's saying, Brent, Brent, Brent. So I have a sort of a fond memory from that.
Okay.
So.
Well, I have to agree with you, the Scops, but for me, the Scops, because I've had such a close relationship with an individual Scops, I was called the person who was running the kitchen here at WildEarthTV many, many years ago. Jess said to me that the guests were reporting this baby owl on the pathway to the rooms, and I was saying, Jess, I don't want any part of it.
I don't want to touch it. I know how this ends.
Yes, I know how this ends, exactly. But not only that, but the feeding of these children is another thing, and so eventually I was roped into taking a look, and I knew that if I took one look, it was destined to be that I would look after it, just because there's no ways I could have left it. The baboons that we had here in camp at the time, there were vervet monkeys everywhere, and we had no idea where the nest was, and it was clearly not safe to be out on the ground. It was a very, very young owl, and we brought it back, and I raised it, and it became known as Who.
That's a very good name for an owl. Sorry guys, we're getting very close to the end, so it's been quite an interesting week with some rain and quarantine right next to our final control, and I hope the next week can only get better.
Oh, of course, it can only get it. it can only be different, and well, different is usually better.
That's why we live in the bush.
That's why
you can never go on a game drive and expect to see the same thing. And from our point of view, we learn different things every day.
Every time. Indeed.
And that's why we love what we do. And we're just really, really privileged to be able to share our passion with as many people as possible. And I think from this point of view, you could never share your passion like this.
No, you couldn't reach that many people in such a short amount of time. I mean, it's great having people on a vehicle, but you're reaching out to 6, 10 people at a time, and here we can reach so many of you. But it's also one of the most wonderful things about it is that when we get guests, they have to come back maybe in a year's time or so, and you have to try and pick up from maybe a 3-night or 5-night visit, and it's hard to condense everything into such a short period of time. What's so fantastic about this is that you can be with us every day over an extended period of time, and we can all learn together, and we can all experience these wonderful things that we do together and look back on them and recall them. And that's part of it, is not only the knowledge that we gain, but the experience of sharing this wonderful nature that we're exposed to here at Djuma.
We're very lucky, and we're unbelievably privileged to be in a place like this. And most importantly, you guys, the viewers, you guys make it possible. And we really appreciate all the questions that you guys send in to us. Unfortunately, we can never get to as many as we'd want to. But
send them in on Drive.
Keep sending them in.
Still get
Drives, fireside chats, keep your questions coming in. And remember, it's questions@WildEarthTV or #SafariLive on Twitter. And remember, we always make mistakes, so we might need help ideating things, so that's where you guys come in. I mean, you taught me a very big lesson with my favorite leopard I misidentified a couple of nights ago. So we really do appreciate all the interaction with you. And from Mark and myself, and I forgot to mention, sorry, we have Brian behind camera, the sneaky thumb, and from Tara and Alex and FC, and all of us here, we really do appreciate everything you send in to us. And it's been wonderful having you on a fireside chat. Unfortunately, our fire didn't get ready, so we got to cook. So good night.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.